Is Carolina going to make the dance? Honest answer? I don't know.
This is Tyler Hansbrough, and you're listening to Locked On Tar Heels.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? It's Tuesday, March 4th, 2025. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast. It's the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Schade, and you're joining me at the place to get your Tar Heels content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for making us your first listen or watch to get your Tuesday started right. Special shout out to all the Locked On Tar Heels insiders, Locked On Tar Heels Discord family, and of course, all the everydayers that are here with us. Coming up on the show today, we're going to get ready for the game tonight against Virginia Tech, the next to the last game of the regular season. I cannot believe it. So we'll have the Four Corners preview. I'll introduce you more to Virginia Tech, and that will all be great, and we'll get ready to go for tonight's game. A couple quick updates and Trivia Tuesday before we get to all that, though. I want to update you on, if you're a regular with our show here, you know that Coach Pat Kilby, Coach Bill Robinson are weekly guests on our show, and their teams are doing phenomenally right now. Coach Rob will be with us later in the week, so we'll talk more about it. But just briefly, Coach Rob's Milligan squad won their conference championship game in crazy style over the weekend, so they're going to make the NAIA National Tournament. That selection show is Thursday. Big congrats to Milligan. And then Pac's team, the Dale Pirates, are in the Elite Eight of the Oklahoma Class 2A state playoffs and looking like they're in really good shape to make a deep run. So congrats to both of these guys, man. It's awesome. Okay, Trivia Tuesday. Here we go. You ready? Carolina has back-to-back games right now of 6 different Tar Heels scoring in double figures. That's the first time they've done so in consecutive games since the 1988-89 season, when they did it 3 straight games against Towson, San Diego State, and Pepperdine. So, Tuesday trivia question for you is this. In the Towson game, who were the 6 Tar Heels to score in double figures? I specify that one because it's a lot of names including maybe a couple guys that are sitting on the bench coaching the Tar Heels right now. That answer coming up at the end of the show. Big conversation to kick off the show today. Before we get to the Virginia Tech prep, let's go big picture, because the big question on everyone's minds right now is what I said right out of the gate. Are the Tar Heels going to make it? Where are we at right now in bracketology? What's the bubble look like? Are we okay? Sausage, I laugh. This came from our mailbag on the Locked On Tar Heels Discord. Sausage Dog Dad, which is one of the greatest names ever, said, Isaac, what's your lookout on our current tournament chances? I know Lunardi isn't in the committee, meaning Joe Lunardi, ESPN's bracketologist, but he has Arkansas and Oklahoma ahead of us, even after their losses this weekend. So let me just say one quick thing about that, and then we'll look at some of this. Short answer is that Carolina is basically still in the same place they've been for a bit now, which is in the grouping that is first 4 out, meaning the 4 teams just ahead of Carolina's group are the 4 at-large teams that would play in the play-in games in Dayton. The group that Carolina's in is the group of 4 that would just be out, according to Joe Lunardi. Obviously, there's so many bracketologists out there, and you just got to find, what you love. I like going to Bracket Matrix because it brings them all together, and you can look at it that way, like an average of all of these brackets. Anyway, what I want to say back to Sausage Dog Dad's question is one of the things that's hard not to do is look at these individual games and how they shift things. Because sometimes it's like you have, for example, when Auburn lost a couple weeks ago at home to Florida, a lot of people assumed they would drop to number 2 in the AP poll while Alabama would go up to number 1. The thing was, they were so far ahead of Alabama, it didn't matter. They stayed number 1. It got closer, but they were still number 1. So sometimes, in Lunardi's case here, even though Arkansas lost and Oklahoma lost, he believed, I'm not saying I agree or not, I'm just saying I'm walking a mile in Joe Lunardi's shoes, that their resume was still better than North Carolina's, even with those losses. Because yes, Carolina won, but it was a game that they simply had to win. It didn't really move things enough to where when you relooked at the entirety of the resumes, Carolina's was now better. So the Tar Heels just got to keep winning. Basically, you don't want to leave anything to chance. Keep winning. Obviously, that starts or continues tonight at Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, and then the Big Daddy coming up on Saturday against Duke. If Carolina could get both of those, man, I would feel very good about it. Obviously, a tall task. And then we've still got the ACC tournament games, and got to make sure everyone understands this. Those games do count toward your NCAA tournament resume. So if you get a quad 1 win in the ACC tournament, that counts on your resume. So you need to make sure you know that. Now, many have asked why, even though Carolina has won 5 straight, have they not moved up anymore? It's a great question. They have moved up some from next 4 out to first 4 out. But the problem is this 5-game winning streak is all against teams that don't move the needle. Like probably the biggest needle mover game was the game at Florida State. That one used to be a quad 1. They've fallen off, and so it was a quad 2 win. But the fact of the matter is, when you look at Carolina's resume, it's hard for me to argue that they should be in right now. It's also hard for me to argue that some of the teams that are in right now should be in right now. And I think, which is also, by the way, a big reason to not expand the tournament, because the bubble is always full of teams that aren't really deserving NCAA tournament teams. But I digress from that. I would love for Carolina to get in, but are they deserving? I don't know. But I will say this. I don't agree with the placement of some of the teams around Carolina that are in better shape, according to Joe Lunardi right now. One of those is Xavier, who is in the first 4 out with Carolina, but above them. And the other is Boise State, who Joe Lunardi moved into his field on Monday when he refreshed a few things. I'm going to put up comparisons on screen in just a second for those watching. If you're listening, I've put these up on my Twitter feed, all my social media feeds. Actually, it's also in the Locked On Tar Heels Discord where you can see it there. Because I believe with what these numbers are, I just have a hard time saying clearly Boise State should be ahead of Carolina. Clearly Xavier should be ahead of Carolina. And so I want to nitpick this and show you why I think Carolina is in great shape. So here we go. I'm pulling those comparisons up. We're going to start with Xavier. Xavier, as I said, is in Joe Lunardi's first 4 out alongside Carolina. But when I look at the numbers and the resume, I think that Carolina is in better shape than Xavier, and like where they have things right now is not what it should be. So as of where all these sat on Monday, Carolina had a better net ranking than Xavier, 42. Xavier is 49th. There are 6 metrics that are on the selection committee's team sheets. 3 of them, KPI, strength of record, and wins above bubble, are all resume-based metrics, and the other 3 are predictive metrics, like what the computers are saying you should do. So that's KenPom, that's Torvik, and BPI. Carolina, in those 6, I'm not going to bore you with the details of what they all are, but what you need to know is that Carolina has a better rank in 5 of those 6 than Xavier. All 3 results-based metrics, which should probably matter more, and 2 of the 3 predictive metrics. When you look at strength of schedule, if you're looking at it on here, Carolina is better in net strength of schedule, in net non-conference strength of schedule, in RPI strength of schedule, and RPI non-conference strength of schedule. And by the way, in those, Carolina is like blitzing Xavier in a big way. And then when you look at the quads, the quad 1, 2, 3, and 4, and there's all this stuff with how arbitrary those cutoffs and things like that are. And, not all quad 1 games are made the same. Carolina and Xavier both have 1 quad 1 win. Carolina's 1-10 in quad 1, Xavier 1-9. The difference in the quads is Xavier has a quad 2 loss and no others. Carolina has a quad 3 loss. And so I think basically a lot of people are pointing to Carolina's quad 3 loss and saying, sorry, that disqualifies you. Well, I've also been told that Carolina, the narrative is that Carolina is disqualified because of their 1 quad 1 win. Well, if that's true, then how on earth are we putting Xavier? Because I've seen Xavier in some brackets. They've only got 1 quad 1 win too. So you cannot tell me that Carolina can't get in because they've only got 1 quad 1 win, and then you move the goalpost for Xavier. Nah, I ain't buying that, man. It don't work that way. And if you want to say, yeah, well, Carolina's got a quad 3 loss and Xavier doesn't, Okay, cool. What about the rest of these good grief, metrics where Carolina is far and above Xavier? How are you going to quantify that and just conveniently ignore all that while saying, well, look at Carolina's quad 3 loss? Well, guess what? If Stanford moves up 6 spots in the net, that turns into a quad 2 loss. What are you doing then? I just cannot buy that. Because if you're going to tell me that Xavier should be in ahead of Carolina, that tells me that you're not looking at the full resume. It tells me that you're pigeonholing one thing. And by the way, the team they lost to is a worse team than their quad 2 loss is a worse team than Carolina's quad 3 loss. Stanford is better than Georgetown, but it's quad 2 versus quad 3 because of where the game happened. I just don't buy it. So if you want to tell me Xavier should be in, great, that's fine. But what I'm telling you is that Carolina should be in as well above Xavier. Now, let's switch and look at Boise State, who Joe Lunardi does have in his field. Same thing. There are different things on the resume that are strengths and weaknesses for each team. But when it comes to this, Broncos again, Boise State, last 4 in, those same metrics. Carolina leads in the net and 4 of the 6 metrics. So it's not 5 of the 6 like Xavier, but 4 of the 6. Carolina leads in all the strengths of schedule things. Now, Boise State does have 3 quad 1 wins to Carolina's 1. Great. You hear that? But guess what? Remember how Carolina, outside of quad 1, their only other loss is 1 quad 3? Boise State has a quad 2 loss and 2 quad 3 losses. So for those that want to argue those quad 3 losses matter so much for Carolina against Xavier, how are you then going to turn around and conveniently forget that against Boise State? Now, we're goalpost moving here. I think Carolina yet again stacks up better than Boise State. And here's the other thing. Sure, Boise State has more quad 1 wins, but they're not as compelling games. They are not playing the same level of competition. For example, Carolina has played 9 different games against teams that are in the net top 25. Boise State, 2 games against the net top 25. They've not challenged themselves, and they're in a weaker conference. So my guess is that the Boise State apologists would point to their higher volume, to Carolina's higher volume of losses, to Carolina's only 1 quad 1 win versus Boise State's 3 quad 1 wins. And I'll say, well, why are you ignoring all of Boise State's losses outside of quad 1? Why are you ignoring Carolina being ranked better in all these matrix and strength of schedule and all that? It's just, I'm not buying any of that, man. And am I saying that? So clearly it's a no-brainer that Carolina should be in. I'm not saying that at all, by no means. But my argument is this. If Xavier should be in, then so should Carolina, and Carolina above them. If Boise State should be in, then so should Carolina, and above them. I'm not buying where Joe Lunardi has either of those teams. So that's where I'm at. Now, we could do that with a whole bunch of teams. Those are just the 2 I picked out to say, like, this comparison to me doesn't add up. You with me? Or do you want to nitpick my stuff as well, which I'm fine with if you want to. I love having those conversations. Now, let's turn our attention to Virginia Tech. They are slow, but also they turn the ball over at a very high percentage. So you know what that means to me? You know what the doctor ordered? It's time to press, baby. Let's get after it. We'll talk about that and the rest of the Four Corners preview in just a second. Right after I tell you about Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades. Supply House. So whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, electrical work, whatever, man, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of you ready for this? Over 200,000 parts from 400 plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need, delivered fast from coast to coast. You need help with an order? Well, guess what? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every single order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trademaster program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. I'm all fired up about that bubble conversation now. I'm just like, get out of here, Boise State. What are you doing, Xavier? Carolina's coming to town. Right? But you got to win. You got to win. And that tonight is Virginia Tech. So, Four Corners preview. What up, Coach Smith? We honor you always. Let's get into it with number one. Tempo matters. Here's what I mean. Virginia Tech is averaging 13 turnovers a game, which is 75th in the nation. That's pretty good, right? Not too bad. But here's the thing. You got to look under the hood a little bit. You got to figure out what's really going on. It's like saying, let's think the other ACC team in the state of Virginia, the Cavaliers, right? Under Tony Bennett, if you have a 5-point lead, it's like having a 20-point lead against another team. If you typically have 80 possessions, you might have 50 against Virginia. It's that same kind of thing. So in this stat, we got to look at the tempo-free stuff. So not the total number of turnovers per game, but the turnover percentage, meaning the percentage of their possessions that ended with a turnover. And that number is very different. So Virginia Tech is 289th in adjusted tempo. So they play really slow. So when we look at their turnover percentage, not total turnovers per game, that number is 19.6, meaning that's essentially 20%, meaning 1 out of every 5 Virginia Tech possessions ends in a turnover. And in that metric, when we look at turnover percentage, they're 313th. That is a far cry from being 75th in turnovers per game. That's why you can't just settle on what you see in front of you in terms of average, man. You got to go next level. That's why analytics matter. Here's the thing. All of that between the slower tempo and between turning it over basically 1 out of every 5 possessions, here's what that means to me. It is a great game for Carolina to utilize their press. And I'll say that for 2 reasons. Number one, you want to speed this team up, man. Carolina has been playing better in the half court lately. Their offense, as we've talked about a lot, has been playing so well and so efficiently. But still, Carolina is much better when they can get out and go before they have to deal with a set D. So use that press. Let's speed things up, get those steals, and do it. So speed them up is a great reason to use the press. And then number 2, make them turn it over. Man, if they're turning it over on basically 1 out of every 5 possessions already, if you can apply that pressure up the ante, you might even up that percentage to where it's basically 25% turnover margin or turnover rate, which is 1 out of every 4. So you can kind of force that percentage up by utilizing pressure. Combine these worlds, speed it up, turn them over more. I'm all in on that. Carolina, if you've watched lately, you've noticed when do they go into that press? Everyone go ahead and answer while I pause. Exactly right. After free throws, made free throws specifically, because you can't press after a missed free throw. So watch for that either on made free throws, sometimes out of a timeout, like if it's Virginia Tech ball out of bounds, out of immediate timeout or something. That's another moment where Coach Davis has employed it. I forget what game it was, but it's been in the 5-game winning streak. There was a team that was struggling. Carolina pressed them, so they called a timeout to figure some things out. Carolina, boom, right back into it. So I'm all in on using pressure to speed up this game and turn over Virginia Tech more. Four Corners preview point number 2. Gotta run the Hokies off the line. They're not a great team. We'll talk about some of those numbers here in a little bit. But one thing they do well, I just said do, is shoot the 3. They are 36.1% from beyond the arc, which is 61st nationally. Obviously, that's not elite, but it is better than where they rank in just about any other number. But the other side of that is that they are not as strong from the 2-point range. They shoot, like almost exactly, they make it almost exactly half of their 2s, 50.2%. And while it's like, whoa, that's a good number, not from 2. That's 218th nationally in 2-point field goal percentage, which, by the way, normalize 2-point field goal stuff on box scores. I want to start seeing that. Okay, back to our regularly scheduled program. What that means for Carolina then is, let's think about this. Oh, they're one of the top 60 teams essentially in the nation in shooting 3s, but they're not as good inside the arc. So what should we do? Run them off the line a lot. Now, here's the issue. Carolina's last two opponents have been bad three-point shooting teams. And remember, Florida State hit exactly half, if I remember correctly. Miami on Saturday was 9 of 30, which they made a bunch, but they missed a bunch too. It was, basically 30% from three, which is not great, but you want to shore it up. And now you're facing a much better three-point shooting team. Got to run them off the line. Four Corners preview point number 3. For the Tar Heels side of things, offensively, got to keep this inside-out game going, man. Carolina, we talked about it with our Tuesday trivia question. Nice diversity of scoring lately, but they got to keep doing it. In opposition to Virginia Tech, Carolina is very good from two this season. They're shooting 55.6%, which is 41st in the nation. That's really good. And when you take that and combine it with the fact that their three-point shooting is coming up, man, just got to keep going back and forth doing all that. And when you look at Virginia Tech's defense, their biggest defensive weak spot is guarding twos. They're allowing their opponents to shoot 54.7% from two, which is 313th in the nation. Big strength for Carolina, big weakness for Virginia Tech. What does that mean? Let's get to the rim. Let's just get two after two after two. What does that do to the Virginia Tech defense? They got to swallow up to attack to try to protect the rim. What does that allow Carolina shooters to do? Kickouts, ball rotation, whatever it is. Let's rein it in from outside. You're just dragging them back and forth. That's the kind of offensive attack I'm looking for Carolina. But that also leads me to the fourth point in the Four Corners preview for this game. You see how I intentionally weave this together all the time? Carolina, we just talked about threes and twos. What about threes and frees? The Tar Heels have been doing a much better job getting back to the free throw line lately. They'd been averaging 15 free throw attempts a game through that rough patch. But in the last 5, they've had 20 or more attempts in every single game. That's great. They're getting to the free throw line. The problem is that now they need to start making them again. So yes, Carolina has been to the line 20 or more times in each of the last 5 games. The problem is that their season average is 73.5%. They've been under that in 5 of the last 7 games. For a team that needs to make a living at the free throw line, and by the way, has the shooters to do so. Obviously, this is not on RJ Davis. He's shooting over 90% from the free throw line in this 5-game stretch. So it ain't him. It's his teammates, man. They got to step up. I feel like Van Allen Lubin, I don't know if the numbers will bear this out. I feel like he's been shooting very well from the free throw line lately. But man, so that's the thing. Keep getting there, keep attacking, keep getting to the free throw line. But goodness, fellas, got to finish more. Got to finish more capably. You take RJ Davis out of the equation, I'm scared to go look at what that would leave the rest of the team in these last 7 or so games from the free throw line. So let's tidy that up to go along with what's happening. The reason Carolina is winning despite that is because they've been so good both from 2 and from 3. All right. Let's get to know Virginia Tech a little more, but here's something I want to say about this game. The Virginia Tech game is more important than Saturday's Duke game. Yes, I promise you I believe that. I'll explain why, plus get you ready for the game and our Tuesday trivia answer, all coming up in just a second. I truly think this Virginia Tech game is a more important game for Carolina down the stretch here. Here's why I say that. Carolina has a path to the NCAA tournament without beating Duke. I know that some have said Carolina not only has to beat Virginia Tech and all these other games they've just played, but they got to beat Duke to get in. I think that might not be the case. If Carolina beats Virginia Tech and makes a run, let's say to the ACC finals, maybe even the semifinals, depending on who they play, I think they can get in without the Duke game. But I'll tell you this. If they don't beat Virginia Tech, that is the nail in the coffin. Why? Because this is a quad 3 game and you cannot afford another quad 3 loss. We talked about it in that first segment. Carolina already has a quad 3 loss. One more of them is a black eye on a resume that already has a black eye, plus the quad 1 inefficiency black eyes. And so getting a second quad 3, you just cannot do that. Taking another quad 1 loss to Duke, that's not nearly as bad as this. So for me, this game is wildly more important than winning the Duke game. Now, the Duke game obviously is critically important, both from it's Duke. Hello, let's beat them. But also, if you win that game, That's the biggest win on your entire resume, and you're probably in. But if you lose to Virginia Tech and you beat Duke, I still think you're on the outside looking in. I think this loss, if you lose the night against Virginia Tech, you're done. So this game's more important. And that's why, by the way, Carolina cannot in any way look past this game. And they got to be so locked in the same way that they have been. I think they will be. They've got too much veteran leadership, too many guys who realize the stakes of what's on the line. They're going to be ready to go. I'm not worried about this being like a trap game, anything like that. But you don't want to play around and get beat. And all that said, man, I'm so proud of this team for the streak they're on, to have reeled off these 5 straight after not looking capable of that consistency all season long. And yes, these wins have been against inferior competition, but they've showed plenty of times prior to this their ability to not blow out inferior competition. So really, we've seen growth, we've seen consistency and maturity from this team in the last 5 games, and I want to applaud them ahead of tonight's game. We'll see what happens. All right, here's the details of the game. Carolina at Virginia Tech. That's tonight inside Cassell Coliseum, 7 Eastern on ESPNU. FanDuel has it Carolina by 7.5. It's 8 at KenPom. The Tar Heels lead the all-time series 73-17. Their coach is Mike Young, who used to be at Wofford. Remember when they had Fletcher McGee? Oh, man, he could put them up. Virginia Tech, obviously not ranked in the AP poll. They're 155th in the net right now. This is therefore a quad 3 game. They're 146th at KenPom, both offensive and defensive efficiency outside the top 150. Their record coming into this game is 13-16. They're 8-10 in the ACC. Their best non-con win was Winthrop. That was literally their only game against a team inside the top 200, and Winthrop was like 170 or something like that. ACC wins, though they've got 8 of them, but against this ACC, it's like, sure. Their highest ranked ACC win is over FSU, who was 90th at KenPom. So their worst non-con loss was Jacksonville, who was 181st at KenPom. No other like bad losses, but fine, whatever. Their usual starters, they've had 2 newer starting lineups the last 2 games, but the one that they've used most consistently goes like this. Ben Hammond, a 5'11 freshman guard, 5.7 points a game. He shoots 48.5% from 3, but he only takes just over 1 attempt a game, gets 1.7 rebounds, 2.2 assists, but he turns it over 1.6 times a game. He's at the one. Then you've got Duke transfer Jaden Schutt, 6'5 redshirt sophomore guard, 8.4 points a game. He's their 3rd leading scorer. He's the dude you got to get out on 3 in particular. 36% from 3 on 5.3 attempts per game. Fills it up at the free throw line, 84%. 2.7 boards and is basically 1-to-1 on assists to turnovers. Their other 3 typical starters, Tyler Johnson. He's another freshman guard, but 6'5", 6.9 points a game, 34.9 on threes, but doesn't take many of them, for basically just shy of 5 rebounds a game. And then your big men up front, and this is what I love to see. Here's a good thing for Carolina. They match up well with Virginia Tech's usual starters in the front court from a size perspective. Remember all those points in the paint Carolina had been dominating with? They should continue to do so. That's that inside-outside we're talking about. So anyway, their front court, Toby Lawal, 6'8 junior forward. He's a VCU transfer. He is their leading scorer, 12.5 points a game. I would imagine Jalen Withers will have the initial assignment on him. He's their only player scoring in double digits. He's also their leading rebounder at 6.9 a game, shooting 39% from 3 on 2 attempts a game. And then Mila Jail Poteet, a 6'9 grad transfer forward from Rice. He's their 2nd leading scorer at 9.8 again. So at 9.8 points a game. So a lot is going to be on Van Allen Lubin and Jalen Withers to hold these guys in check. Because again, it's their 2 leading scorers. He doesn't shoot Poteet from 3, literally no attempts, 3.9 rebounds a game. So there you go with the starters. The guys off the bench, you need to know who, a couple of these have factored into the starting lineup recently. So you might see some of these names in the starting 5 as well. Patrick Wessler, and he's their one lone like big dude in the rotation. He's 7-foot center. Ben Burnham, who's another strong 3-point shooter, by the way. Brandon Reichsteiner, and then Jaden Young. Those are the 4 guys that you might see off the bench or in the starting lineup. My prediction for this game, it is going to be the 6th straight win for Carolina, extending their season-long longest winning streak. It will be their 5th straight double-digit victory. However, I'm going to say that the 80-point streak ends. Carolina has 80 points or more in all 5 of these games so far in the winning streak, but I think the slow Virginia Tech pace is going to bring Carolina in just under 80. Give me Carolina 75, Virginia Tech 65 on the road to complete the 6-game winning streak and set up a big-time important showdown with Duke on Saturday. All right, let's wrap things up with Trivia Tuesday. Carolina, I mentioned it earlier, back-to-back games in which the Tar Heels have had 6 double-digit scores. That's the first time they've done so in consecutive games since the 88-89 season, when they did it in 3 straight games against Towson, San Diego State, and Pepperdine. You ever been to Malibu? I haven't, but I hear that campus is insanely rad. My question to you for Tuesday trivia: who were the 6 Tar Heels that scored in double figures, specifically in the Towson game? Any guesses? All right, here we go. Let me tell it to you. I already gave you a big fat clue. 2 of them are coaching on the Carolina bench right now. That's Jeff Lebo and Hubert Davis, joined by a guy that did a lot of the radio broadcasts last year, Pete Chilcutt, who's been a guest on our show here, Steve Bucknell, J.R. Reed, and Scott Williams. So let me give it to you again. Jeff Lebo, Pete Chilcutt, Steve Bucknell, Hubert Davis, J.R. Reed, and Scott Williams. That's why I chose that game, because those 6, I was like, I feel like a lot of people could probably get those answers. So there you go. Can Carolina make it 3 straight to join that with six double-figure scores? Woo, that would be something special. We'll find out tonight. All right, guys, thanks so much for joining me on today's episode of Locked On Tar Heels. Great to be together to talk about where Carolina's at on the bubble, getting ready for this Virginia Tech game. Want to remind you that we will be live after the game tonight. Make plans to join me. One of the best ways to do so is subscribe on YouTube. If you're watching, just hit that little subscribe button right down there at the bottom. Make sure to hit the bell notification as well, so you get notifications whenever a new episode drops or when we go live, and you can just tap right in. If you've not joined the Locked On Tar Heels Discord family, we'd love to have you there. That link is in the show notes, as is the link for Locked On Tar Heels Insiders, where you can go next level with the show, one-on-one access with me, as well as ability to see all my stats and charts and data. That's free to all the insiders, right? So make sure you check that out. Be with us tonight. It's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll talk again after the game, hopefully celebrating not a therapy session. But until then, peace.